Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes.
Happy Wednesday. It's Kaylee Hunt, the Food Freedom Fertility's podcast editor. This week's fan favorite is all about treating PCOS. Hosts Caitlin and Sophia go over blood sugar balance, eating a balanced breakfast, getting enough fiber throughout the day, and so much more. This is a fan favorite because Caitlin and Sophia give tips that they have seen give their clients the results they were looking after. We hope you enjoy this re-released episode.
Welcome to the Food Freedom Fertility Podcast. We are your hosts, Sophia Pavia and Caitlin Johnson, both registered dietitian nutritionists, and we are here to discuss all things fertility, food, and women's health related. So welcome.
Hey, Sophia.
Hello, Caitlin. Guys, listeners, we've got the giggles today, so just so you know,
Yeah, you're in for a good episode and some good laughs today.
Neither of us are very good at talking today, but we hope that you're good at listening.
Yes. So last week we kicked it off with an episode all about PCOS and how it affects fertility, and this week we're going to talk about what you can do about it.
Hallelujah. PCOS is very, very treatable. And that's what we want you to know in this episode is that there are real life solutions, real life treatments, and that although there is no known cure, there are treatments that are super effing powerful. So that's what we want you to know. The end.
Amen.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. So let's get you pregnant with PCOS.
Woo! Great. So where should we start, Caitlin? If I was one of your clients or if I was one of my clients, so let's say I came to you with PCOS, I want to have a baby. I know that this is treatable. I know that there are things that I can do with my nutrition, my lifestyle, all kinds of things. Where do I?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I would say coming in with that type of positive outlook is amazing because that's not always the case. So the first message I would send is it's very possible to get pregnant with PCOS. And so you should have a hopeful outlook. Sometimes there's things we need to work on and fix and change, but it's very possible to get your cycle going, to confirm regular ovulation. And as long as PCOS is really the only thing slowing, things down, and again, I'm not saying stopping, just slowing things down, then it's very possible to get pregnant with PCOS.
That is a wonderful message.
Yeah, doubling down on a positive attitude on, at the get-go is awesome. Then I think the next thing that we really have to do is kind of set a framework for where is your body at right now. So a lot of the digging that we talked about in the last episode, what type of lab work do we already know that you have? I give patients a symptom questionnaire so that we can kind of on a scale rate how much their different symptoms are bothering them. And that also sometimes gives me a little bit of a glimpse into do you have a little bit more of an insulin resistant type PCOS, or are your androgens all likely to be high just based on what's going on with your symptoms and how much they affect you day to day to day. Mm-hmm. And then looking at a nutrient baseline. So usually what I'm trying to do is just establish this beautiful woman in front of me, what is her personal baseline? What are her labs telling us? What is her nutrition telling us? What is her lifestyle telling us? What are her symptoms telling us? And kind of assess what her environmental status is like. Is she taking supplements? What type of medications is she already on? Just really looking to get a very complete picture of where things are. So if you're a lady with PCOS and you're not working with somebody like Sophia or myself, it's possible to get a hold of this type of lab work and really set the framework so that when you do start working with somebody that's expert in this, you have as much information as possible to really hit the ground running.
Yes. That's important to note is that as much as Caitlin and I love working with women with PCOS, as practiced as we are at it, as much as we can kind of, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Sometimes it's a goose. Sometimes it's a swan. We like to do lab work and actually get some tests done so that we're not just working off of symptoms only, because sometimes symptoms can be misleading, or they can, just kind of send us in the wrong direction. Sometimes we just kind of start in the wrong place. So the lab work is really important.
Yeah. So, I mean, because you can have a number of reasons that's slowing down or stopping ovulation, like we talked about in the last episode. Like it could be your LH to FSH ratio. You could have really high testosterone. You could have really high prolactin. So, really zeroing in on why something may be giving off this signal that ovulation isn't happening and periods aren't coming regularly. We need to kind of get to the root cause of that so that we can treat it as appropriately as we can and get to a solution as quickly as we can. So that's really like the first thing I do is establish kind of a personal baseline for somebody. And then really treatment is geared towards what we found. A lot of times there's really low hanging fruit in terms of diet that we can work on. And because so many women with PCOS we know are insulin resistant, working on blood sugar balancing is typically one of the first things I teach someone. So I think we could definitely dig into that.
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. So balancing blood sugar is something that, like, we talk a lot about, but getting into specifics can be really helpful. So there's three things that I think of that can really benefit blood sugar balance. And the first thing is protein. So protein-rich foods, your protein gets digested by and large in your stomach. So it does a lot of that mechanical breaking it apart. If when you're eating an entire meal, there's enough protein there, it slows down how quickly your body digests food. And because of how it kind of slows that process down, you can think the same amount of energy would reach your blood at a slower pace. And so your blood sugar would come up more slowly. So making sure that at different meals and snacks, there's always a quality source of protein and enough protein at those meals and snacks can be a really great place to start in terms of starting to balance your blood sugar.
Okay. So when you say, I'm just going to kind of like ask you questions that I think our listeners are maybe wondering to themselves. So you said quality protein. What does that mean?
I'm looking for a food that isn't going to be ultra pro-inflammatory, that is also going to provide mostly protein. So for instance, I wouldn't look for beans as your main source of protein in a dish because there's just as much carb in a bean and usually more than there is protein.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for something like a meat,
Yeah.
cheese, even a nut or a seed. There's enough protein and fat there to really kind of slow down the blood sugar spike when you're eating. Focusing on dairy can be very high in protein as long as you're looking at a dairy like a cottage cheese or a Greek yogurt, which
Mhm.
by and large, I know a lot of the PCOS population is being told from different avenues that they should be dairy free along with gluten free. And
Mhm.
that's not necessarily true. Not everyone needs to cut out dairy to successfully manage their PCOS. So if you've been living that lifestyle and you've heard that, I would challenge you to maybe try adding in a protein rich type dairy food and see, does that inflame your symptoms with PCOS? Because if it doesn't, that's a really quality product that can help you kind of bridge the gap in different snacks and meals to get a food that's high in protein.
Gluten-free, dairy-free is so trendy right now when it comes to PCOS treatment. And I mean, it is so true. There are some women that really do better having no gluten or no dairy or limited gluten and dairy in their diets. But really, when we see like big changes in PCOS, like the big first foundation, it's just like what Caitlin said, getting that blood sugar under control. Because you can be gluten free, dairy free, and you can be eating all kinds of things that are totally messing up your hormones that are gluten free, dairy free. Like you could be eating like sweet, sugary fruits and just filling your belly with all these fruits on an empty stomach without protein. It's going to do worse for your PCOS than if you had like a whole wheat cracker with peanut butter or cheese. So, oh my gosh, you're having gluten and dairy in that same meal. What's that going to do to your PCOS? Well, it's actually going to be more beneficial for you to have this whole grain protein snack than something that's gluten-free, dairy-free, but is going to send your blood sugar into orbit. And I always
Right.
like to really emphasize that with all of my clients is like, yeah, okay, maybe being gluten-free, dairy-free will help you. We got to cross that bridge when we get to it because there's work we have to do foundationally to even get to the place where that could benefit you.
Yeah. And, since we're talking about gluten-free, dairy-free, I don't think it's a bad thing to trial. I don't often trial them together. Pull gluten
Mm-hmm.
out and see how you're doing. Pull dairy out and see how you're doing. Because pulling them both out together, you don't really know which one may have given you so much benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So, with any type of elimination from your diet, you try and limit the different variables that are at play. So I would say, trial moving one out for like 4 weeks and see how your body does. If your acne clears up overnight when you pulled out dairy, then that's probably a good thing to keep out of your diet or keep in limited quantities.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody makes like the most world's famous cheesecake or you're in New York and you want to have a slice of real cheesecake, then give yourself a little bit of a break and just know you might have a zit or two, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that I see by and large people really need to cut out in order to get pregnant or even to manage their PCOS.
Yes, it certainly could be helpful, but it is not the like turnkey solution that it's often touted to be in the social media world.
And frankly, I think quality dairy and quality gluten, like part of the reason why I think wheat and gluten gives people so much of an issue is because we're eating, GMO, super sprayed with pesticides. Like it's not a super healthy whole food oftentimes by the time we're getting it. It's been
Totally.
processed, depleted of its nutrients, extra nutrients added back in. It's just not a great product. But if you're getting like a ancient grain, organic, you know, they ground it 2 weeks ago, that's a completely
Mm-hmm.
different story, right?
That is so, so true. And especially when you're pairing it with balancing that blood sugar and keeping that insulin in check, because that's it, in my opinion, at least, that's kind of like square one when it comes to PCOS nutrition. What's the first step
Absolutely.
that we're taking? And yeah, and it's just, I mean, not all dairy and grains were created equally. Like your skinny cow ice cream sandwich, that's like super ton sugar with very little fat in that like gluteny cookie on either side of your sugar, non-fat milk, ice cream in the middle, that is going to do something so different to your body than the fact that you had some whole wheat soba noodles in your noodle bowl that also had like tons of veggies and protein in it. These things are
Right.
not the same. Having a sprouted grain English muffin versus having like a Belvita breakfast cookie. It's
Right.
not going to do the same thing. So that's again, and again, I think, Caitlin, we talk about this a lot, but like women with PCOS, this is probably not the first time you've ever tried to change your diet. You've
Right.
probably been worried about your weight for quite some time. And as things have progressed, you've maybe run your metabolism into the ground by dieting and not dieting and dieting and not dieting and coming in hot saying all your favorite foods are out the window because you have to be gluten and dairy free is just a recipe for a crash. We
Yeah,
really
it
do not
doesn't
like to do that.
it doesn't support balance.
No.
So, like getting back to, working with balanced blood sugar, the next thing that I start to think about is how do we make sure that there's fiber at a meal or a snack? So, protein is a basis for the plate, and then looking for fiber. And oftentimes, the places that I'm looking for fiber are not the places that, as a kid, we were taught to get fiber, like oats or breads, right? Like some
Or
sort of
these days,
grain.
a fiber gummy or a fiber mix that
Right.
you stir into your juice.
Right. So, I mean, I'm looking for fruits, I'm looking for vegetables, I'm looking for nuts and seeds. Um, there's people think like, oh, I'm eating this whole grain toast and there's like 3 grams of fiber for 25 grams of carb.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could eat like half a cup of artichoke hearts and get like, I don't know, 5 or 7 grams of fiber.
Mm-hmm.
So, not all even fiber is created equal. So I'm always looking to see if we can check that box with a fruit, vegetable, nut, or seed if I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can, looking more towards something like a whole grain.
That's awesome. Yeah. And ladies, let me tell you, when you start eating the amount of fiber that's recommended, so like 30 grams in a day, let's say, oh my gosh, you find that you are eating so much food. There is so much food to get that much fiber. Like we're talking about multiple cups of vegetable, multiple pieces of fruit. There is just a lot that you get to eat to fill your belly when you're eating that much fiber. So it really curbs hunger and you end up being able to eat a lot of food. Whereas a lot of times when people try these like elimination diets or when they're trying to just lose weight because their doctors told them, hey, lose weight because you have PCOS, they eat very little food and are hungry all the
Right.
time. Fiber is great
Right.
for fighting that hunger and keeping that belly full.
Yeah, like the other day I posted a picture of one of my snacks and it was like a third of a cup of hummus that I drizzled probably a tablespoon of olive oil over and then like an ounce of feta cheese. And I put an entire red bell pepper cut up next to it and like a handful of baby carrots. And I took a picture and put it on Instagram. Somebody wrote me and was like, I'm so relieved to see this amount of food. Like, is this what you ate for a snack or did you share it with somebody? And I was like, yeah, no, I ate that for a snack. And I ate the whole thing. And I ate it at like 3. We didn't have dinner till 7. I felt great until dinner time. If I had had like toast with jam on it, or if I had had, even a protein bar, I'm not sure if I would have felt full until dinner. And part of the reason for that was how much, fiber and plant matter my body had to work through to digest that. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And just chewing, like the physical act, like you can't, a protein drink, you could slam that down in 30 seconds. You could not eat that snack in 30 seconds. No way. And so like the act of chewing and swallowing your food, it keeps you full for longer.
right. And it's not to say I would never have a piece of toast with like, say, peanut
Sure.
butter or even cheese on it. It's just that would not keep me as satisfied as long. And the other reason, especially too, when we're talking about fertility, I like to talk about it and I call it the PCOS plus plate. Protein is the primary kind of basis for any meal or snack. And then the second thing is the C, the colorful fruits and vegetables. And that brings in the fiber without saying eat fiber. So we're talking about the foods that you actually eat versus like these different nutrients or components of food. So protein is the basis of your plate. That's your Greek yogurt, your meat, your cheese, your nuts and seeds. I don't know. What am I missing?
Sometimes
Those are
beans, I guess, depending on who the person is
yes.
and what else is in the meal.
Yeah. So, I mean, but those are the big hitters. And then the second thing, getting fiber, well, that comes in the sense of colorful vegetables and fruit and really trying to fill half your plate with those things more often than not. And then the last thing that's really helpful for blood sugar balance is fat. And so in my PCOS plus plate, we call that oils and fats. And that can come from olives, can again come from nuts and seeds, can come from a nut butter, can come from avocado, can come from a full fat cheese or, that Greek yogurt that maybe was the basis of your snack, a full fat Greek yogurt, then you're getting some fat in the mix. Or you could add additional nuts and seeds on top. So finding protein, fiber, and fat at any given meal or snack is like the golden recipe for balanced blood sugar.
I love it.
And it also keeps you full long enough. Like sometimes people crash and burn with diets because they're eating less and the foods that they're eating are so stripped of the good stuff in them that their body is like just crying out for more fuel. And it's not that you have to eat perfectly 100% of the time, but if you more or less kind of subscribe to the PCOS plus plate, so protein, colorful fruits and vegetables, oils and fats, and then I say S is starches and carbs as condiments, that gives you some starches, some carbs, but not like they're not the basis of your plate. It's not a sandwich in the middle of like 2 really big slices of French bread. The amount of protein to carb in that ratio is kind of off for blood sugar balance. So you might do better with like an open face sandwich with more vegetables on the side. If we were going with like the typical American sandwich as lunch kind of a scenario.
Yeah, or like the half sandwich with the soup and salad
Yes, exactly.
with lots of veggies
So
and yeah.
So balancing blood sugar, like honestly, for any hormonal condition, right? Even if we weren't talking about PCOS, this is like foundations for getting your body out of this stress mode all the time and giving it some balance. When you choose not to eat this way, so let's give an opposite scenario. Let's say you get up, you're super tired because your life is hard and stressful and whatever. You zoom over to Starbucks, you get a plain bagel with cream cheese and a vanilla latte. Like you're downing right there maybe 80 grams of carb for maybe like 18 grams of protein. The balance, first of all, we didn't have anything colorful in that scenario. There's no fruit, there's no vegetables. A plain bagel is not giving you very much in the form of fiber because the flour in it's been very stripped in processing. And a vanilla latte is full of liquid sugar. Like we've literally zapped you with caffeine, zapped you with sugar, and given you a whole big helping of carbs to start your day. Even though it might be pretty caloric and like dense in terms of calories, we haven't really supplied your body with much nutrients or much to slow down a blood sugar spike. And it's a recipe for you to have like a really high blood sugar high in a curve and then a really low reaction. Like your body's going to crash at the bottom of a roller coaster. And an hour and a half later, you're going to be starving and reaching for something else. Whereas if you'd maybe made an omelet at home with vegetables and cheese and had a cup of even coffee or green tea or something next to it where we didn't pump it full of sugar, even with a slice of toast next to it, you're going to feel full for much longer than, that kind of breakfast on the run that was full of processed carbs and liquid sugar.
Yes, the hot liquid sugar or even the iced liquid sugar. That is just, boy, and we don't blame you, ladies, because the sweetness plus the caffeine in those drinks, it just lights up the pleasure centers of your brain so, so intensely. And it just, because of that, it hardwires you to want more caffeine and more sugar as the day goes. Caitlin and I even experience this ourselves. Like we obviously do this for freaking living, but there are times where we'll be like, oh yeah, let's have one of these berry scones in a latte because it's like birthday breakfast or something. I tell you not, we will be craving sugar the rest of the day if we start the day with something like that. It's not because you have no willpower. It's not because you don't know what to do. It's because you gave your brain the wrong fuel first thing in the morning, and now it's jonesing for that same high all day long.
Yeah. I mean, think about a kid. If you give your kid, give a small child candy or cake, they're not going to want to go eat broccoli and chicken, right? Like they're hardwired to want that thing that's so sweet and so pleasureful. And we're just old kids. Like you're just a grown up version of that 4-year-old you once were. And whether it's, something that you actually literally think about, or it's just hardwired into who we are and our brain chemistry. Like when you have something like that, of course, like, God, I love bagels and lattes too. I'm not saying that I don't. I just know that it doesn't support my PCOS. And so, 9 days out of 10, that's not going to be my breakfast. Balancing blood sugar, super key, super foundational. And then the second part of that PCOS plus plate, the colorful fruits and vegetables, especially when we're talking about fertility, is so vastly underrated by most people. Getting the colors of the rainbow is so important for us to feed our body the nutrients that it needs in order to make quality eggs.
Yep. Yeah, I second that absolutely. And so much of what Caitlin is saying, like Caitlin works exclusively with PCOS. I work with a lot of PCOS, but I also open up my practice to women who are experiencing fertility challenges that are impacted by nutrition in other ways. And it doesn't matter if it's PCOS, doesn't matter if it's endometriosis, it doesn't matter if it's an egg quality issue. I get a lot of patients with egg quality issues. These are still the same foundations that I start with them. And so much of it is training your body that there is enough nutrition to support another life. It's okay to ovulate. It's okay to have another baby or even your first baby because there's enough nutrition to go around. And so it's totally possible to be eating enough calories. So you're still having your period, you're still ovulating, but you're not having that quality ovulation that results in a pregnancy and a healthy baby, because what you're eating, though it may be calorically rich, is nutrient poor. And so this is really a great point that I bring to all the women in my practice as well, is increasing the nutrient density, making sure you're getting all those colors in your meals and snacks so that your body's like, oh, okay, it's a season of plenty. Let's have a baby.
Absolutely. And one of the steps that I take women through in kind of that establishing the personal baseline is kind of eye-opening. And it's not something that you have to do forever, but I have them create an account with a website called cronometer.com, cronometer.com. It's like a online food logging app, and you can get an app on your phone or you can do it on the computer. And the reason why I like this one, other than it's free, so anybody can get it, is that it doesn't just look at your calories that you're tracking, but it actually digs into how many antioxidants are you getting? Like, how is your B vitamin intake? What's your vitamin E intake? What's your vitamin D intake? And if we have them track 3 or 4 days, we can see, in your normal style of eating where there's really big gaps. And it can help you very quickly kind of identify those. The other thing, since I'm talking about this, that I'll have them do is I'll have them look at their total intake for the day, not how much calories they're eating, but how much protein is there compared to how much carbs is there. Because a lot of times people come in and just like a very standard, at least American diet, the carbs are 2-3 times the amount of protein in most of our diets. And it's very helpful to see if we can close the gap in that carb to protein ratio and get the carbs closer to equal or maybe like 1.3 times the protein. It's not that you have to track forever. It just can be really eye-opening. Then we make a couple tweaks and suggestions in their diet. And then like a month later, have them track 3 or 4 days again as we've made some of these things habits and see if we're closer to the goal. And the other thing that you can do is look at your total fiber intake for the day. So I often am recommending women that are trying to conceive, especially with PCOS, hit that 30 grams of fiber per day. And for them to track and see like, oh, this day I had 8 grams of fiber. And on this day I had 24. What was the difference between those and what foods really gave me a lot of fiber so that I can focus on that more? And just finding those kind of like blaring, signs that something's a little bit not wrong, not off, just not optimal. And how do we move closer to optimal to support your fertility?
Yeah, that's really the name of the game, because of course, Caitlin and I see women that have medical issues, that have diagnosable IBS and endometriosis and food allergies and things like that. Yes, we don't turn you away if you have something like that going on. However, it's so much more common, at least, I mean, I can speak for myself, where it's like, I don't really know. I feel like I eat pretty good. And like, most people before they go and drop some dollars on working with Caitlin or I have probably tried a thing or two on their own and, know what a vegetable is and have been trying to eat more of it. So it's really awesome to kind of have that as like, well, what's really going on? Because it could be that given your best intentions, you've kind of fallen victim to some of this diet misinformation out there, and you're getting your calories from other things that aren't really nourishing you the way that just good old fashioned fruits and vegetables will.
Well, and like, think about it. A lot of people know that they have insulin resistance coming into PCOS, right? And so the really like alluring, super in vogue thing to do right now is to go keto. And sure, at face value, you're like, well, I'm not eating carbs hardly at all. I'm under like 20 net carbs in a day if I'm eating true keto. And sure, that may improve insulin resistance for a time, but you've also essentially cut out most fruits and vegetables to accomplish that. And we've literally annihilated two important food groups that give you so much nutrient dense food.
Mm-hmm.
Besides the fact that keto's just you're never going to want to eat keto 100% for the rest of your life. So part of what we're doing when we're treating your PCOS and treating your infertility is getting you to a balance where your hormones are happy enough, like Sophia said, to feel safe to get pregnant. We want your hormones to feel happy and safe all the time, even when you're done in your fertile years and you're done growing your family. So we need to teach you a way of eating and living that's is going to be sustainable for you for the long haul. And learning how to let protein be the basis of your plate, learning how to incorporate more fruits and vegetables, learning how to eat a, a quality fat and enough fat. So many of my clients come in, they're like, oh, I can't eat that. I was on Weight Watchers and that's too many points. And, you look at it, it's because it was a fatty food. And it's like, no, fat is actually good for you. A lot of your essential vitamins for fertility are fat soluble. And if you don't eat fat, you're not going to be absorbing those very well.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of trying to take the extremism out of it. You don't have to go keto to get pregnant with PCOS. You don't have to go gluten or dairy free. You don't have to cut out entire food groups in order to find balance in your body. And actually, I think that you're going to be way better off if we can find that balance without doing those extremes, because you're actually going to be able to maintain it into a healthy pregnancy and beyond.
Yeah, that's really important because listeners, we want you to understand that food is slow medicine. So it's not going to be like you hop into your 6-week program and you crank through it. And by the end of it, you're like pregnant and good to go. That does not work for most people. A lot of times, I mean, even just changing your egg quality can take 90 to 100 days. And that's just to see a change in your egg quality. So hormones are pretty slow to heal. And you're not going to be able to go on this like crash diet and see long-term results. I mean, that's true for pretty much anything, right? But especially when it comes to trying to conceive, Caitlin and I work with people, and yeah, sometimes we do have women that get pregnant within 6 weeks of working with us, and it's amazing and we love it. But more often than not, we're looking at those pregnancy positives 6, maybe 9 months down the road. And that might sound like an eternity right now while you're trying to conceive. Bear with me. It's because your body can take a bit more time to heal. So if you are not eating in a way that you can support for 9 months, 12 months, several years, as you have multiple babies or you deal with issues as they come up and you're healing your fertility, that diet is not going to work for you. It has to be something long-term in order to be effective for hormones.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I had a client the other day message me like, "Oh, I'm doing my Clomid cycle and I ate a piece of chocolate cake and now I'm like scared that I'm not going to ovulate the cycle." It's like, "Girl, you're doing all this other work. One piece of chocolate cake is not going to ruin everything." So, helping people find balance and not feel ashamed with some of their food choices is, I think, a lot of what Sophia and I do with people too. And I hope that transfers through this podcast. Now, I don't think you should eat a piece of chocolate cake every single day if you have PCOS. It's not going to help you manage your PCOS and get pregnant. But like you go to a birthday party and somebody made a homemade, super yummy chocolate cake, have a small slice and enjoy it and don't feel guilty about it.
And don't eat it alone for lunch like some of us did with a brownie last week and we're sick for an entire day from it.
Yeah.
That was me, listeners. Yeah. And it does happen. Like, sidebar, I ate a brownie for lunch last week, just like a straight up giant chocolate brownie for lunch. Oh my goodness. I felt so sick, pounding headache, queasy, terrible. And it happens. These things happen in life. So what did I do? I picked myself back up. I ate a nice protein rich dinner. I hydrated, did the best, you pull it back together afterwards. You don't use it as an excuse to just continue abusing your body for the rest of the week. But these things happen. And we like to really account for that in the programs that we give to women as far as how they should be eating when they're trying to conceive, for PCOS especially, because sometimes you're just like, I've been doing so well. This is fine. And you throw yourself for a loop. You need to have an eating program that you can then kind of like get back into right away. And it's not like, okay, the diet starts tomorrow, where there actually is room for chocolate cake.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I mean, that's a lot on diet. And,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, if you spent the next week working really hard at the PCOS plus plate, so protein, a quarter of your plate or as a basis of your plate, half your plate, colorful fruits and vegetables, a healthy serving. So, like at least your thumb size of some sort of fat source, if not more. Like, sure, eat a whole half of an avocado with your eggs in the morning. That's fine too. And looking more at the carbs as a complement to the meal or a condiment and not the base. And so when I say that, I mean like if you're going to have a vegetable curry with beef, okay, have, pull the onion and the bell pepper and the snap peas and the carrot that's cooking in the curry and put a lot of that in your plate and put some beef and some of the yummy curry sauce over it. And then instead of putting a cup of brown rice underneath it, put a third of a cup of brown rice on top so that it's not the base of your plate. If you're going to have a spaghetti night in your house, the way I do it in my house is I layer like 2 cups of raw spinach on the bottom of my plate. And then I put about half of a cup of whole grain pasta on top of it. And then my sauce and my meatballs or my meat sauce or my, chicken Parmesan and sauce over it to where, look, I still got a lot of greens. I still got, the extra veggies that were in the sauce. And sure, I had some yummy pasta and it even had gluten in it. And I'm managing my PCOS, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not 2 cups of pasta because I can tell you foods like rice and pasta, they're really easy for you to eat large amounts of. And if you slow it down with lots more vegetables and just stop making it the base of your plate, but let it be kind of a highlight to the meal, I think you'll be more successful at managing your PCOS.
Absolutely. There's no forbidden foods.
Yeah. So start trying to work on that PCOS plus plate. Maybe consider making yourself a chronometer.com account and track your food for a few days and look at your carb to protein balance. Look at your fiber. Are you getting close to 30 grams of fiber a day? And look at your vitamins. How are you doing? Are you like every single day, you're not getting hardly any vitamin A? You know, maybe we need to look for a little bit more vitamin A in your diet. So looking for big gaping holes can be really helpful.
Love it. Okay, so let's say we've been doing the nutrition deal, got that down. It's been a couple weeks. We're ready to take the next step. What else do you recommend?
So next I start moving into kind of supporting the environment and maybe addressing areas that if we were to add in supplementation, it could help us reach our goal faster or correct something that may be like underlying metabolically wrong. So one of the main things that I'm looking at with lab work is, does this person have a symptom picture of insulin resistance? Does this person have a symptom picture of high levels of testosterone? Does this person have a symptom picture of both of those? Does this person have high kind of a stress response and symptoms from that, or low thyroid? And then I try to match supplementation that's going to help address where those things overlap and what might be causing. So, like, taking a step back and what might be causing high levels of testosterone. A lot of times, high levels of testosterone are a result of high insulin levels.
Mhm.
So if we can address the insulin levels, the testosterone may improve on its own. Um, so I I like to look at our goals and how quickly we're trying to get pregnant. I might be a little bit more aggressive with somebody who's 37 or 38 and we're kind of closing in on their fertile years versus somebody who's 24 and we've got, a good 16 years left of fertile years.
Mhm.
If they're a little bit older, I might bring in some heavy hitters a little bit earlier on or rely a little bit more on supplementation to see if we can kickstart ovulation or get a more robust or more frequent ovulation. So, a couple of supplements that I think are worth highlighting here in this podcast. And again, guys, this is not in substitute of working with a doctor, a dietitian, a naturopath. This is not personal medical advice for you. So, make sure that If you're hearing something that you're like, yeah, that looks like it might fit for my scenario, check it with the professionals that you're working with. Okay. So,
Absolutely.
um, let's maybe move through supplements by category. So, when I think of insulin resistance, there's a few that come top of mind. And again, some of these overlap for other areas, but inositol is very top of mind for both insulin resistance and can also help improve ovulation and egg quality. So, inositol is a sugar alcohol. It's kind of like a B vitamin relative. And we have a bunch of different types of inositols in our body naturally. Comes in food. And in the PCOS population, we kind of have imbalances in different parts of our body in the types of inositols that we have. And I bring this up because there is some recent research that seems to point towards having 40 parts of myoinositol to 1 part of dechirioinositol. And there's a lot of really popular supplements that have this ratio. But specifically with women who have PCOS that are trying to conceive, if you look at all the research, there's a lot more research that points towards myoinositol being a really good fit for helping with insulin resistance and ovulation. So in our ovaries, in a PCOS ovary, we have too much dechirioinositol and not enough myoinositol. So the idea is, well, if we give somebody 40-1, that's a lot more myoinositol than it is dechiro. And in these studies, women performed really well, especially at the 3-month mark, taking this 40-1 ratio. But we're over converting from myo to dechiro in our ovary. Okay. So I've seen really successful progress with women in my practice taking just myoinositol, because myoinositol becomes dechirioinositol. So if we have too much dechirioinositol, adding any more may not be helpful. So I specifically in my practice typically recommend doing myoinositol alone. And it's a really great supplement because it overlaps both insulin resistance and improving egg quality and ovulation factors in PCOS. Sometimes the level of insulin resistance is pretty high. And even though we're addressing things with diet, it makes sense to add in a second layer of support. And so usually when I'm looking for a second layer of support, I might look at N-acetylcysteine, or we call it NAC, or berberine. And it kind of depends on a scenario, which one I might choose over another. N-acetylcysteine was actually really hard to get at the beginning of this pandemic because it's an antioxidant. It's really good for your immune system. It can actually help you improve your cervical mucus. So it's a good fit for a lot of people, but it also helps improve insulin resistance. So that's one that's, oftentimes kind of top of list. If somebody's really insulin resistant, like we're talking pre-diabetic, borderline diabetic, but they're not on metformin or something else, I might try berberine, just because there's so many great studies in showing its benefit with lowering insulin resistance, has very low side effect profile, very safe with a lot of other medications and, other herbs and things. We always want to look at interactions between things. And so sometimes I bring in berberine. But so a lot of times I'm using myoinositol, bring in maybe a second layer if it seems like it would be helpful or it crosses off kind of another area that we're trying to support or help. Another one that I think of oftentimes in fertility, but also relates to blood sugar balance, is actually vitamin D. So vitamin D, no matter where you are in the country or the world, I am always, kind of surprised that it doesn't matter where you are, even if you're in a really sunny climate, most people are vitamin D deficient. And super important for fertility, but we also see as vitamin D levels come up, insulin resistance improves. So we want to bring it up for fertility. It lowers your risk of other complications once you are pregnant, like preterm labor, preeclampsia, like things you want to avoid anyway. It's important for your baby and their bone development, but it's super important for your blood sugar balance. So optimizing that can be really helpful. So those are kind of the main ones that come to mind in terms of blood sugar balance, insulin resistance, that also can kind of overlap with other things that we may be addressing with fertility.
Take away from that, myo-inositol might be the best deal, not the D-Chiro, even though the incredibly overpriced posh supplements give a combination of the two that might not be worth it for you. And NAC, which potentially does a lot of other good things in the body, berberine and vitamin D.
Mm-hmm. And if you're coming in and you're like, hey, I also have really high levels of testosterone, there are other things we can add to help rather than just waiting to see if correcting the insulin resistance improves your testosterone levels. Because, like Sophia said, when you're looking to deal with hormones at the root cause versus just slap another hormonal medication over the top of it and try and make it do what you want, sometimes it takes a little bit more time. You can try to address the testosterone in and of itself or the high levels of DHEA. And so other ones that I think of in that realm, again, check with your doctor because some of these have contraindications. Like you don't want to take one of these if you have high blood pressure. But so the first one that kind of comes to mind, top of mind, is zinc. Zinc's really powerful for both egg quality and lowering testosterone. If you're somebody that's plagued with acne with PCOS, sometimes zinc can help with that too. Peony and licorice, which are oftentimes used more with like a Chinese medicine approach, can be really powerful at lowering testosterone. Licorice is something that you really don't want to use if you have high blood pressure. So again, just check with the professionals that you're working with. But those come to mind. And then other things to just calm the body or help the body, support the body with its processes, like magnesium. If you have really slow bowels and we're working on increasing your fiber, adding in the right type of magnesium might be really helpful. Magnesium is also something that we see a lot of women with PCOS be deficient in. Also helps with blood sugar balance. So that's another really great supplement that kind of overlaps and improves different areas of health and may make you more comfortable as you're making these other changes. Supports muscle relaxation and good sleep. So that's another one that kind of comes to mind and I use frequently in practice. And then, I'm always advocating for high quality prenatal as the basis for care for anybody that's trying to conceive because, we're human and are even with like perfect pursuits and efforts, we're never going to get everything 100% right. And it's just a really good kind of insurance policy on making sure that you have high quality of certain types of nutrients at a baseline so that if you do conceive, you've already got that on board. You don't want to wait and start taking a prenatal once you are pregnant. It's better to start on a prenatal 3 to 6 months even before that.
Very, very true. And we actually have an episode about a really awesome prenatal coming up in a couple weeks. So stay tuned for that one.
Mm-hmm. And then fish oil. You want to chat a little bit about fish oil? I mean, I thinking about prenatals, that's another thing that a lot of my clients are on. Yeah.
Yeah. So fish oil is another one that I recommend quite a bit as well, because just generally as Americans and people that are not eating tons of fish all the time, it can be challenging to get enough omega-3s in our diets. And that's really what we're looking for when we do a fish oil. Now, what is an omega-3? Why do we need to take it? I don't want to give you guys an entire chemistry lesson here, but basically it's an essential fatty acid that helps reduce inflammation and is really important for your body building anything new. So if you think about each time you ovulate, that's kind of like a new egg. When you're having a baby, it's all this new tissue. When you're getting ready to begin your cycle, it's new endometrial lining. So there's a lot of like growth and newness happening inside of you and all of these processes related to fertility. Omega-3s are really important for that. We like fish oil specifically because the kind of omega-3 in there is DHA EPA. Don't be seduced by the algae oils. They don't have the same DHA EPA. Don't be seduced by the krill oils or all these other things out there, plant-based or what all. We like fish oil because of that DHA to EPA ratio. It's great for any kind of new tissue as well as reducing inflammation, which is a big problem with PCOS and really a huge problem I find kind of across the board with anyone who's trying to conceive. Addressing inflammation is one of the first steps.
Yeah. So well said.
Thank
And
you.
especially in the PCOS population too, oftentimes it kind of comes with this constellation of high levels of cholesterol or an
Mm-hmm.
imbalance of cholesterol, and fish oil can be really helpful for that too. So yeah, that's
Just
just
kind of
another.
fill in your nutritional gaps. That one's not so much, with these other things like the NAC and the berberine and stuff like that. That's more kind of like a functional supplement where we're trying to get your body to make adjustments in one direction or the other. The vitamin D, magnesium, omega stuff, that's more filling in nutrient gaps in your diet. So supplements can do a couple different things.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a lot on food and kind of supplementation. Um, Other things that I go over with women in practice to help them manage their PCOS have to do with like addressing what types of movement might be good for them to incorporate or maybe to slow down on. Um, I address things like stress management, improving sleep quality. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is usually low hanging fruit for a lot of people. If you're sleeping like 4.5, 5 hours a night, let me tell you, getting 3 or 4 more hours of sleep may do wonders for your body feeling safe enough to conceive. Like you can't
Absolutely.
underestimate quality rest enough. And a lot of times people are saying, well, like, I would like to sleep that long. I just can't get my body to do it, or I have anxiety at night and I can't turn my body off. And so
I have
sometimes,
3 dogs and they're scratching and licking all night long.
yes. And so it's like, well, okay, I know you love your animals. I know they're your babies. Get them out of your room. What adjustments can we make to make your sleep quality better? In the sleep hygiene world, we talk a lot about that, like getting your room dark enough, making sure it's cool enough and you're not like super hot. Even down to like my husband was complaining the other day that our sheets are noisy and that we need like sheets that don't make so much noise when we turn over. And I was like, okay, well I'm glad you told me. Let's address it. So think about
Mhm,
your
totally.
your sleep environment and what do you wish you could address? Do you need like blackout curtains to make it darker in your room? Then invest, $30 and get yourself some blackout curtains and make it easier to fall asleep or stay asleep.
Or a sleep mask. I'll put a link in the show notes to my favorite sleep mask. It's a Bucky 40 blinks. And they're like, what, $15, maybe 20 if you're getting the one that's like got a cool design on it or something. But it's just a little padded eye shade that I put on. And it's almost like the final trigger of like my brain being like, okay, there's no more. There's no
Mhm.
more texting. There's no more TV. There's no more conversations. There's no more shifting and adjusting and getting up to pee again. And like, this is it. It's time for sleep now. And that can be really helpful, especially like I know, ladies, we aren't the only piece of the puzzle when it comes to getting pregnant. There's also a dude in the mix, and he may be gaming or texting, or if you're like my husband, scrolling around, looking at different things on YouTube and shopping for various items online, looking at weight equipment and things like that to the wee hours. And blackout curtain or not, if the person laying next to you has a screen going, that light is going to be bugging you. So getting a sleep mask can also be a great option.
Yeah, totally. I started using the Calm app about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, and listening to like sleep stories before bed because I'd gotten in a really bad habit of like watching Netflix till I fell asleep and just the blue light coming in my eyes, even just light coming in my eyes versus listening to something. It really kind of changed the game for me. And so like you could listen to like guided visualizations or sleep stories from Matthew McConaughey on the Calm app. I mean, there are things
Is
that you
that
could
his
probably do
voice
to
you
improve
choose?
it. That's no, it's definitely not the voice I choose, but I think it's the one that they offer to everybody on your first night. And I was like, I actually have an unnatural dislike of his voice. And so when
All
I
right,
heard
all
it,
right, all right. Who's
yeah,
ready for
no,
bed?
no, it's way more as like breathy. Like every time he talks, it's like,
Like a Lincoln commercial. I know just what you mean.
yes, totally. It's a Lincoln commercial. Anyway, yeah, I almost actually didn't like the comment because that's what they gave me first. I'm like, did you listen to my preferences at all? Do you know me? But I've actually really ended up liking it. And lately too, I've been taking just like 5 minutes to do some yoga stretching before bed for a completely different reason, but it's actually been helping my sleep. Yeah. So, these things are active changes in your life, not active in that, like, it's not that hard to stretch for a few minutes, not that hard to listen to a comment,
But it is.
but it's different than watching Netflix and just like binging your life away before bed.
Why can't I bring myself to stretch for even 5 minutes a day? I just don't know. I have gotten out every day of my life. I'm like, I'm going to do a yoga YouTube video today. It has happened 0 times.
You need to give yourself like a good reward if you can string a few days together of that in a row.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I would say,
anyway, this is not about me, guys.
I would say though, focusing on sleep quality and length of sleep is vastly underrated in the fertility world and can do just remarkable things for your health and improving your hormones. So that's something I would really focus on if I were you and trying to conceive, listeners. Usually there's room for improvement there.
Yeah. I even, so on my intake form, when I have new patients, I used to have this question that was like, do you use screens within 2 hours of going to bed? Never had anyone say no to that.
Yeah.
Always.
Everyone. Off.
I just took it out of there because I was like, obviously you're using screens right up till you fall asleep. So let's try to find a way to do this better. Let's give you some blue light blocking glasses and see if we can give you 15 minutes without a screen before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
And that's just the time that you're taking to like take a shower and floss.
Yeah. So, those are kind of like the basics. I guess we could talk, give a minute or two more to talk about exercise because that can be really powerful for women with PCOS.
Yeah. Let's touch on that because that is something that I see as an issue. Like so many times, women with PCOS, my gosh, you have been told to lose weight so much that you're like the best customers in the gym. Yeah. You have been to every class, you've been on every machine, you have done every Jillian Michaels program. And so often it's the best intentions and the greatest heart and so much effort, but it's misplaced and it's pushing your body in a direction it doesn't want to go and can be causing more problems than it's helping.
Yeah. So the two first things that I say about working out is it's important that you find something that you like enough to keep doing it. Okay. So don't kill yourself doing something that you don't enjoy and you dread. And that doesn't mean that it may not take some time to learn something well enough to be able to do it and feel confident. But if you just hate it, there's probably some other type of movement that you can do and get a similar benefit. So find something that you like.
So I don't have to stretch for 5 minutes. Okay. Got it.
Well, that's not exercise necessarily.
All right, fine. Go on.
The other thing that I will often say is this is more individualized than you think. A lot of people are like, well, I should be doing HIIT or I should be doing strength training or I should be doing, and it's like, let's take a step back and look at where you are now. Sure, strength training is probably good for every human being on earth. But if you're 280 pounds and your joints really hurt, like I'm not going to go tell you to start squatting. Okay. So we're going to start in a different place depending on what your personal baseline is. Like what kind of activity can you sustain right now that's going to be comfortable? You might do better getting in a pool and having, those like foam floaties that give you some resistance or getting some resistance bands at home.
Remember when pools were open? Yes.
Well, there are some places in the world right now.
But, well, good for you, listeners. I'm jealous, obviously.
Yeah, but that, telling you to go to like CrossFit and go ham on, like HIIT type of exercise with a lot of weight resistance is not going to be great for that particular client. So kind of looking for something that you like and then considering where is your body at and how can we add some sort of resistance in? Because by and large, what I see is cardio, 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 and nobody's willing to do anything with their own body weight or going to a gym and doing anything that has some sort of like actual weights connected to it. And your body weight can be enough to begin with. Like if you're used to running a mile, why don't you run as fast as you can for a minute and then give me 15 squats? But you can use your own body weight to build in some of this resistance, but having some level of body strength type of conditioning is really powerful for women with PCOS.
Yeah, that's really important to remember. But I think the biggest takeaway from this, ladies, is what are you going to do consistently? Because sometimes, yes, that involves like what's your favorite workout, but also involves like what's available to you. Like, I mean, I love using the Pilates reformer, love it, but I don't have one of those in my house and I don't have $35 to spend on a class 5 days a week in order to do that all the time. So it might not be you get to do your favorite thing always, but you find things that are like an okay substitute in between. Just like, I was saying, I'm having a little jealousy of you ladies who have access to pools because here in Southern California, the pools are all still closed. And it would be so nice to be able to swim for exercise or do some kind of water aerobics, not available here. So what, am I just going to either do something I hate or do nothing at all? No, you have to kind of come up with what's the best you can do given your current situation and still something that you like enough to do consistently.
Absolutely. And the other thing is there is some really good research that shows yoga can be really powerful for women with PCOS. There's some research that shows it helps lower androgen levels, that it helps lower insulin resistance, that it helped women with kind of moving their BMI. So, building in some sort of yoga practice, even if it's 1 or 2 days a week of breathing and stretching. And the nice thing about yoga is you do have your own body weight that you're oftentimes holding. And that can be incredibly powerful. And in addition to that, the breathing that they do in yoga classes can be really helpful for your nervous system to just kind of calm down. And I see specifically in women with PCOS trying to conceive that it can be really grounding. I just recently had a client who, like, she didn't need anybody to tell her to do any type of working out, really good at working out, doing lots of different variety and different things. And I was like, hey, I think you need to add in yoga. And she's like, well, yoga is not really a workout to me. I was like, I don't think you need to do it for working out. I think you need to do yoga to stretch and breathe and lower your stress. Like, I think you need it for other reasons. You don't need to count it as your workout. You just need to incorporate some of the principles from it for a few weeks and see how you can take that and apply it to your life in maybe different ways. I believe in that so much for PCOS that in my Find Fertility program, like I hired a yoga instructor and we have 10 flows that we're uploading into it this time that we're relaunching the program. And I'm really advocating for women to try and kind of bring that practice into their lives as they're trying to conceive, because I just see it being so beneficial. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is.
True.
Yeah.
I just don't, I'm the same thing. Ladies, I don't have PCOS. Okay. But I think one of the aspects of PCOS that we talked about just a little bit was that you can have really high stress hormones or you can just be very reactive to stress hormones. And that is something that is definitely an issue for me. And it can be almost like addictive. Like you become so adapted to like running hot and like having all this adrenaline all the time. And like, so you want to do the workout that's like, lift that weight and like go to CrossFit and do all this stuff because it's kind of feeding that like adrenal surge that you're feeling inside yourself. And to go have to be quiet with your own thoughts when you're all keyed up all the time is really uncomfortable. And it can feel better to like hit the trail or hit the weights. But what Caitlin is saying is like double true for women like me, triple true for women like me with PCOS is like, just because you're feeling that kind of like surge of anxiety and what all inside of you, it's not good to then go feed that with like a high intensity workout and, a long strenuous run. It can work against you, in fact. And so doing something that's more like breathing, calming, stretching, as uncomfortable as that can be mentally, and, frankly, physically, if you never do those things, but it's so valuable. And that's why I'm saying I need to do this myself, because I kind of feed off of that like stress. And I think a lot of women with PCOS have the exact same thing.
And there's other studies too that show yoga can be really powerful for fertility that have nothing to do with PCOS. And I think some of that just may have to do with blood flow, deep breathing, and that lowering of stress that Sophie's talking about. 42% of women with PCOS suffer from anxiety. So, like almost 1 in 2 of you that's listening would probably really benefit from yoga just to help your anxiety levels. Not to mention what it's going to do for your posture, for your strength, for all the other things. And I will tell you, having kind of a Christian upbringing and background, when I started going to yoga, people were like, "Ooh, that's woo-woo." And some of it is. Don't get me wrong, but I approach it as a workout. And when they tell me, like, put your happy thoughts out into the universe, I pray to God. So you can make it what you want to make it. And you can also go to yoga classes, or there are Christian yoga teachers online. If like that's a big thing for you and you just don't want to filter those thoughts through your brain, you don't want to have to do the work of it, you can find an instructor that it's about stretching and breathing and strength building and relaxing, and there's different types of yoga. So I think that that's really powerful. I hired a yoga instructor for my Find Fertility course very specifically so that it could be a relaxing and strength building yoga flow and have nothing to do with anything else. We're not connecting with the earth. We're not, grounding
Saluting
into
the
our
goddess
mat.
within you with the goddess
Right.
within me.
Yeah. Like, no, it's
And we're
none
not
of
knocking
that.
you if that's what you want to do. It just doesn't have to be that.
Exactly. And I was really against it. And then in college, I worked for a company that paid to let me go to yoga. And I was like, wow, this is like so incredibly helpful and powerful. And I left those classes feeling taller, stronger, and more relaxed than almost any other workout I've ever left. So I think I've plugged this for way longer than I even meant to. I think it would be
Yes,
powerful
this
for
is
you to
not a
try.
yoga podcast, but
Yeah.
obviously that is something that's good to do. And it's something that counts as physical activity for PCOS. It does not have to be this thing where you are cranking on your stress hormones and sweating your face off and like walking away from it needing a Gatorade and a wheelchair. Like, you can absolutely do things that are more gentle to your body, and you're probably better off for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that that's a lot for people to digest. Let us know. Show up on our Instagram. Seems to be our favorite way to communicate with you and you to us. So let us know if you have questions or if you want to hear more deep dive into different things. And as always, if you love us or you even think we're helpful at all, please rate and review our podcast wherever you're listening to it, because it helps other women like you find us and allows us to help them too.
All right, ladies, we're happy that you spent some time with us today, and we love you. You're the reason we do what we do. Oh, wait,
Amen.
we have to do the Yeah Girl. Remember our thing? Yeah Girl?
Yeah. Yeah, girl.
Oh,
Okay.
we
You go
almost
first.
forgot. Oh my gosh, I have to go first. Okay, what's my Yeah Girl? I would say my Yeah Girl, there's a few of them. I have had a couple clients get some big fat positives, and it is so exciting. I absolutely love it. And it just makes my little heart melt. So, what would be a specific one? One is a client of mine who has had some losses in the past. She has been pregnant and even some late term losses, which is just so sad. And it's been really scary for her to want to get pregnant again, and been really scary for her now that she is pregnant again to kind of accept it and embrace it. celebrate it, share it, all those things. And she's really starting to get to that place where she is opening her heart to this baby. And that is one of my favorites.
Amazing.
So how about you?
I'm gonna do a PCOS one since this is our
Sure.
PCOS cast. And so I had a patient that started with me about 3 months ago, and while she was still on metformin and birth control, but with a goal to get off of both of those. And she was really afraid that when she actually came off birth control, like she'd tried many times in her life before, that she wasn't going to get a period. And she just emailed me today that at 32 days after coming off birth control, she actually had her first period. So she feels really good about next steps. And I want to share that to women with PCOS because it doesn't have to be this like scary thing to come off the pill when you're ready to get pregnant. We can get you cycling and get you ovulating, especially like in her scenario. She did a lot of work over the last few months so that the transition coming off was going to be a lot easier on her body. So that was very exciting.
Love it. All right. Well, we hope that you love this episode, and we want to hear your Yeah Girl story if we have helped you at all. So go ahead and DM us, comment. We want to hear all about it.